All right. Hi, everybody. Um, uh, my name is Aman Husbands. I'm a professor here at Ohio State University in the molecular genetics department. And it's my privilege to be able to moderate this book reading for Amaya Sunn, AKA Rahwa, AKA my youngest sister. So, so she asked me to do it, and I'm really delighted. I thought it was a fantastic book, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talk with everybody and talk to her about it. So as the event is essentially going to be broken down in three parts. We'll start with some readings from Amaya, and then we'll go into a discussion between the two of us. I have a few questions and a few ideas, about yeah, in fact, some questions that I have about what she was thinking and about her perspective on art in general. And then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, but indeed also if anybody has um, some favorite passages or favorite poems that they really liked and why, what resonated with you. So that's basically going to be an open discussion towards the end. And so there's some features here. Zoom is not the best, but one of the nice things is that you have your chat features. So if you have any questions that come up during it, just type them in the chat, and then I can bring that up in the discussion as well. And then in the discussion, if you raise your hand, if you look in participants, there's a raise your hand thing. I'll bring this up again, and then you can unmute yourself and ask any questions and read any poems that really struck you. And so with that, Amaya Sun, would you like to do some readings?
I actually would. Thank you very much. So, I want to thank everyone who made it out tonight. I know that folks have been working and people have their schedule, so I truly appreciate it. And so, this is my second collection of poetry called Rising. And I am going to start off doing a spoken word piece from my first work called Things Unsaid. All right. So, I dedicate this poem to the Eritrean refugees, to all Ethiopians, more specifically those in the Tigray region who have suffered immensely during this difficult time. This poem is for you. Undesirables, holding tight to a dream, escaping oppressive regimes, foreign to this land and its native tongue. Promises of routes to promised lands, only to be met by traffickers making demands. Casualties of greed held ransom, frightened souls kidnapped off their exodus to Zion, cutting body parts for organs sold to the highest bidder. The sweet smell of prey draws terror close, left to navigate through barren desert jungles. And as you select the deserving, they suspend into nowhere, dwelling on your fringes, pawns of secret deals and sealed agreements, ousted civilians awaiting entry. Sold what could not be harnessed on their backs as they swam across seas they flee from, splattered blood in dungeons of hell, pitch black cells and screeching wails. These are the ghosts made of flesh and bone. These are the ones without a place to call home. Because survivors of war are told to cope, just to stay alive, just to make it over the border, just to make a life from the life that was spared. But when they sleep at night, they sleep suffocated with their trauma. Right before the dawn, they convene with their nightmares. Their peace is saddled with heartbreak, raising their children with it, bearing it as their cross. This is their way of holding on to the lost. You see, their struggle was the price for our lives. Freedom of choice is often replaced with a conviction of duty, a responsibility to atone, to produce what could not be, to prove that all they had sacrificed was not in vain. Thank you. So I am going to now read from my actual book, my second book, Rising. Just so you know, the cover is in Amarinya, which is the national language of Ethiopia. The first book was in Tigrinya, and it's Yenesal, which is Rising. So one of the things that I touch on in this work is really this topic of healing and how it's, we've sort of mainstream mental health now, and it's kind of like the thing that people talk about, but within communities of color, I believe we're still behind. Going to a therapist is still seen like a taboo thing, even though as people of color, we are the ones who suffer the most systematic trauma, right? And for me, I've always wanted to prioritize that healing because I feel like with healing, if you are someone who knows how to deal with the inner self, it makes a difference in how you show up in the world. It makes a difference in the quality of relationship that you have. So these pieces are really illustrating that and showing for me what that process has looked like and felt like. So I'm going to read this on page 115. It's called Transparency. Healing is a passive state, a slow and frantic slaying. Exempt from the realm of reason, there are no negotiating terms or formulaic timelines, only incessant intention and surrender. To observe your dismemberment in such a way humbles you into admission, causes you to confess that with all that you knew nothing at all. Um, some of these poems are broken down in prose too, so read some more of those. There is no sense in battling the ocean. Better that you look for its pulse, find rest in its waves. That's called flotation. Um, this is called change. There is no glamour in change. Rather, change provokes vanity, dismantles comfort, encoded in the veins of every living thing, outlasting nations, outliving pantheons. Change is war and creativity, a symphony of lunation, ebbing and flowing with the heart of the universe. So the next piece I'm going to read is actually different. It's more so like a short story. And it's a snapshot of a time, a memory I had when I went back to Asmara, which is in Eritrea, and I was visiting my grandmother. And so, really, this poem has to do with food and how food brings us together in our culture. And really, this whole sort of story, there wasn't much verbal interaction between her and I, but the memory in my mind is so rich. And I tried to convey that in this short story piece. So we're going to do story time if you guys are ready for story time. Okay. Eritrean sunsets are ritual bathings, a holy reunion, the exuberant finale of rays dashing across the East African sky reflected a warm orange fire against my grandmother's dark brown skin. Cooking supper in her backyard kitchen, a huge bowl of minced onions mounted as she steadily diced away. I sat observing, wondering how not an ounce of salted water streamed from her eyes. Maybe all the years of preparing meals made them form a protective layer, or maybe it was the never ending saga of heartbreak that depleted any tears she had left. Abaya lived through Italian colonization, a civil war, and the death of 8 small children. Yet when she smiled, you knew she was a woman who honored life. The making of food is a concentrated art form intuited from the soul. Comfortably squatting forward, both arms dangled from my knees, intently watching her brew ingredients. Dorhowet is a staple Habesha dish, one that every girl should master if she ever plans to find a husband. Nevertheless, at that age, a husband was the furthest thing from my mind. I was more concerned with outrunning the boys rather than marrying them. Abaya tore plucked skin from the chicken, chopping the naked bird into 12 symmetrical pieces, then throwing it into a saucepan. Ginger, parsley, two half cut red onions, and garlic boiled in water to make the broth. She instructed me to pass her the long wooden spoon as she began to work the base of the stew. When the onions browned, she added fresh tomatoes, coriander, berbere, an Abyssinian concoction of spices and peppers, simmering in esme in herb-infused butter. Aromas that seduced me into a nostalgic stupor. These daily communions were sacred. When we cooked together, everything that separated us from age to language to continent seemed to disappear. Most of all, I was relieved to escape a sticky, noise-filled New York summer. I did, however, miss the vibrant energy, the gritty streets, the sounds of loud tongues beating back and forth, where culture, chaos, and hustle coalesced into a planet of its own. New York City was the second mother that raised me, but here I felt no fear or confusion, only peace. Abaya transferred the tender chicken and boiled eggs into the stew, then added 2 scoops of broth. We sat in silence, waiting for the flavors to settle. For a moment, her mind retreated, as if a smell or a sound or my face had triggered her. She gazed inside the bubbling pot of dohawet, staring in stillness like it was a mirror into an unforgotten world. The first 4 children never made it past 3, mysteriously passing from an unnamed disease. Although she wasn't ostracized, the community believed it was a curse. Traveling by foot to gather dirt from monasteries, holy water from priests, tsebel, roots and leaves. Nothing worked until my father was born. At his christening, they paid the priest to wrap their son with a mescal, a hand-carved cross. Uncustomary to tradition, he was not given a godfather. My grandmother professed, "Your godfather is the cross. Your godfather is God." They kept his head half shaved to keep the evil eye away. He made it past 3. 4 more died after him. Nightly wailings of supplication. He can still hear the reverberating echoes, an orchestra of cries singing the names of his siblings in melodic sounds of mourning. Dejected and wondering why God was punishing her, Abaya learned to live with fate, never staying in her depression for too long, a common trait of a Hamasane woman. There was too much to be done, too many things to tend to. Imbued with deference for their wisdom, she had come from a long line of women who were forces to be reckoned with. Resilient, vocal, and true to her blood, she continued forward. The smell of food enraptured us, shaking her out of her daze. She grabbed the wooden spoon and stirred the dorhawat one last time. After diligently examining and tasting her work, she finally announced dinner was ready. With a stern and gentle tone, she turned and said to me, "My daughter, when you feed your family, you are feeding them love from your heart. That is all that food is, love." Miracle child. Thank you. Thanks, thanks, thanks. All right, so I will do one more piece. This is called Train of Thought because it's a pretty long poem, but it's what it is. It's train of thought. It was just like a freestyle that just I downloaded that just came to me. And it's funny because unlike the poem or the piece I just did, which was like a short story piece, it takes a lot of like thought and structuring and breaking things down and like tons of editing. And with this one, I just didn't think. I just sort of let my subconscious mind flow. So I hope you like this last piece. This is called, what is this called? Oh, I just said it, train of thought. All right. Cries call for the dripping moon to flicker, a chance for the destitute to soak in the wind. Crossing pallets of disfigurement, we wedged between the hollow tree. Blue bloods basking under yellow suns, we harmonize as lost tribes among fangs, rich with devil warnings. The wanting of dead feeble servants sitting at the door. I am the third daughter of rebels who severed heads, bursting from pitches of black lanes sprawled before the food of captives. Loving longer than needed, speaking faster than needed, I shook the stars with my chords. Repenting to injured flowers, bells of dusty dreams chiming louder as children of yonder waited to exist. I hung waiting for bliss. We are not allowed to enter the bed of the sea. Our sin is drenched in guilt, quilting ourselves together while the world tears the trimming of our seams. Leftover vestiges of a glorious people showered in violet rays. We did not last through genocides and horror shows to sing lullabies. We sing frightful songs of joy, chanting ourselves back into the ether, rolling in a meadow of machine guns with blades hiding in our blouses. Arms clutched, elbows locked, we walk where the soul takes us. Chromosomes that give lessons on how to be human, not sequestered or patted down, but boundless and expounding. Our spines are ladders into ailing windows, watching reruns of torment. We are tired of carrying the abyss on our backs, trauma that keeps coming back like a hungry dog. You make wings out of something not persistent. You give it class, style, X factor it into excellence. You see, being misunderstood is good. It means you're alive, kicking and screaming like a newborn. Daughters, future kings can't afford to be mild. They are blackberries, sweet and ripe, staining the hands who pick and devour them. The fruit of what was and what shall be. No more selling short to stories of bloodshed that ring like clockwork, brainwashed with devised explanations, neatly shelved and packaged for consumption. How did you make the river stop flowing? How did you change the rhythm of rain until she abdicated to you? Detours into shadowy corners of hurt have emboldened me. I am holding my people's beauty in a sack, preserving it through this long, wicked winter. Divided up, pulled apart, and shaken down dizzy, we taste home but can't touch. I live eternally. And one time in this subjugated body, so my mission is to rip her open until the world feels its shame. I've learned how to love millions of times in eons and quadrants, but here it's the hardest and easiest to forget. What I do know is that love needs love to survive. So keep fighting for us and keep fighting for love. Train of thought.
Whew,
I know.
that's one of my favorites.
Thanks.
That's beautiful. Wow. Wow. Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess I had a few questions to kick us off. Sort of just general questions. I mean, this and your previous book have a real autobiographical approach, right? You take an autobiographical approach to this. What? Yeah. Why?
You know, I don't know why for me in particular, but for me as an artist, I've always felt like being vulnerable is easy for me. I know that most of us, and I would say most artists are like that. We kind of have to put ourselves in this position where we're vulnerable. But I also feel like when you are able to tell your own story, when you're able to share your journey with others, I think that's when you could really connect with people and you can actually, um, speak from a place of wisdom, right? Because wisdom is just experience and knowledge that you've applied. And
Mhm.
so everything I write about has to do with not just like my triumphs, but where I've been weak, where I've made mistakes, where others have hurt me, where I have felt sort of, you know, uh, maybe my own dignity was stripped, and being able to write about that. And when you do that also, it's also a form of healing for yourself when you're able to just talk about that and sort of let it out and share it with others. In return, what you get is you get sort of this peace within yourself, this resolution, this reconciling of all of these things that you've gone through.
That is a very difficult process, though, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
I mean, it's yeah, when you're going through the process, you're a lot of this those old emotions are coming up,
Yeah, that's right.
things that you actually didn't even know were there. Um, and so, but it's sort of like a labor of love. You know, you do it also too because you're compelled to do it. So with writing both books, it was like a goal that I set. It came from a higher place or some deep place within myself where I felt like this is a part of why I exist here, right? To share and to create in this way. So a lot of it too is it's simply just who I am,
Yeah, this is
and
just
allowing myself to be who I am.
this is just a core part of your art, basically. However you do it, whatever form it takes. Because
Right.
before this, yeah, your art takes many forms, right? It's not just poetry. So, have you always had this approach then? This is sort of a universal as
Right.
who
I
you are.
mean, did like folks who've known me for a long time know that I used to do music. I used to be a rapper when I was younger. I used to sing. And I think that all of that was really cool. I mean, the common thread in all of that was I was writing, right? So like I've always been a writer. It's just taken different forms. But I think with this style and this form and this medium that I've taken, it really allows me to be myself fully. Like I feel like I'm my full expanded self when I'm writing stories and when I'm writing poetry.
Yep,
So,
yep. Okay, I see that. So this specific book, though, yeah, definitely, I picked out a few themes in there, and one of them to me was motherhood. Right, indeed, that comes up right away, right in that dedication to your mother and to being a mother, and indeed New York City as a mother. This is like ideas that I hadn't actually considered. So where did that come from? Why are you moved to write about that now?
well, I think like this book is definitely an ode to all women. And then I think even this concept of motherhood doesn't necessarily need to be designated to birthing a child, right? Although I have birthed a child. I have a 9-year-old son, and my mother birthed me, and this is how we continue the line and legacy. And so, but you can also be a mother of art. I've known amazing women who've never had children but have mentored young girls and have fed so much into their lives, right? Even thinking, like you said, of like New York City, I had my household, right? My mom, but when I stepped outside, it was a whole different world that was mothering me, right? So coming from sort of dual cultures and being raised by this American culture, this very New York culture, but also being super Habesha, like being very Ethiopian, very Eritrean, um, and how all of these different things have really influenced me. And yeah, I don't know if that answered your
No,
question.
no, absolutely. I mean, I guess you could think about motherhood as nurturing, or you could think about it as creative, right? As an act of creation. So I was sort of, so yeah, okay,
Right, and that's essentially how this planet is staying afloat is really women, right? Women are central to any society. And so, especially with all the things coming up now, this is why we really have to rethink the way that, the level of respect that we're giving women, the level of equality that we're giving women in our society, and to not fear that feminine energy, because it is a powerful energy, but getting to a point where we can come to this space where there's a balance of power.
yeah.
And I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question, right? It's like, do you want women in positions to act like men, or do you want women to actually come at problems, who come at problems differently, who do it differently and better? And I think that's probably what you're advocating. Yeah, I agree. So you think we're making progress?
Yeah, I think that a lot of what being a woman is intuition,
Mm,
right? I don't think for at least in my journey thus far and what I've learned, it's less about grit and being forceful, and more about being in tune and balanced internally, right? And being in tune with nature, being in tune with and connected with those around you. And I think that to me is power,
I
right? Power isn't necessarily, dominating people or having to subjugate another group so you or these, sets of people so that, you can feel powerful. Powerful is something that comes from within and that's given
exactly.
to everyone.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a different approach to that dominating style versus something that's more collaborative and healing. I completely agree.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually great. Just because I wanted to ask about power, section power in the book, which your book is broken into five individual categories. What would you call them?
Chapters.
Chapters. It's fair. So maybe I'll read it. Let's see if poetry is genetic. I hope I do a good job.
Yes,
So
my
it's,
brother, the scientist, let's
oh
see
Lord, am I ever?
on poetry.
Ever. Yeah. So this one is under a parasitic order. It is treasonous to crown yourself an equal. Walking
Mm,
with your neck elongated, dignified and proud, is to leave yourself vulnerable. Endings begin, worlds plummet when those who reign refuse to confront their feelings of inadequacy. And then at the bottom it says, "Whose country?" I really
mm,
like that. So my first thought right away was that this is a critique of white supremacy, right? That
yeah,
of current structure. That was initially what I thought, but I wanted to ask you what you were thinking.
I mean, absolutely. Like, if you think about the fact that in this country, not too long ago, if you were a black man and you looked at another white woman in the eye, right, or if you didn't bow your head when a white person was, walking past you or, didn't step off the sidewalk, you could literally die. You would be lynched, right? And so I think that in and of itself tells you sort of what sort of structures exist in this country. And so for me personally, right, coming from a family that is East African, specifically Eritrean and Ethiopian, we are a very prideful people. We have a very rich culture. We have a very rich history. We know, we know where we come from, right? And there's so much to be proud of as Ethiopians. So you naturally, without trying, right, you come into this country and you're just, that's how you are, that's how you've been raised. But you start to see the microaggressions, especially having gone to certain schools that are mostly white. You can see, not obviously not all white people, but you can see that people tell you to remember your place in so many ways, right? And I think that it's important for us, and all of that is dying away now too, right? This whole structure of white supremacy is being broken down. All the systems and structures that we've been used to for so long are literally falling. And this is really a time where all of us have to rethink things like white privilege. Well, not us, but you know, people who hold these positions of power, not saying, oh, well, my ancestors didn't do this, why are you blaming me? It's not so much about that. What it is that you're benefiting, right, from a system based on your color, and it's like, how much of that are you willing to give up, right? And can you rely on just, there's a Toni Morrison quote which I'm sure everybody here knows, but she said something like, if racism were gone, who would you be,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, do why is it that you need to rely on the subjugation of a people in order to feel important, in order to feel like a whole human being, right? It's not natural. It's not a part of the makeup of who we are as human beings,
Mhm.
you know?
It hurts everybody. I always said white supremacy hurts everybody. It hurts some people more, but
Right.
it's a really toxic setup. Yeah. So you think
Absolutely.
so indeed you think we are making progress in that. So where do you see our allies or who's actually really going to be helpful allies in this process? We need to come at this in a different way because I agree. I do think it's breaking down, but it's going to take a lot of people with it. I mean, think
Yeah.
of what happened. Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
I think when you talk about allies, all it is that, it's this white savior complex, right? We don't want to come in saying,
Yes.
we're coming here to save you. And that's for every group and every individual. Like, you save yourself. And that's really what I talk about in this book, is through tapping into yourself, through tapping into your inner power, being able to connect with your higher self, community, right? And, rethinking all these structures, you're able to create the life that you want and the world that you want. No one outside is going to come and save you. It has to come from us. It has to come from within.
So indeed, how do we do this, right? I think increasingly we have more and more control over this ourselves. So, for example, independent publishing versus self-publishing, right? So maybe we could talk about the nuts and bolts then about being an artist. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, for me, I self-published both of my books, and
Okay.
that was a very intentional choice. It might it might be the part of me too that's like very controlling and needs to needs to like be a part of every single thing that happens. But also it had to do with me just uh, doing the work not to necessarily be famous or get this notoriety, but because this was something that was really deep within me that I felt was very personal and was sort of like my own little cocoon and world that I was creating and wanted to share that with others. But I also think that it says something, right, in the world that we live in today with this DIY movement
Mhm.
and with the internet and with social media and all these other platforms, you really can create a space where you don't necessarily need these, I guess you would call them gatekeepers, right? In order to make art. Like we can all make art and we can share that art. And I think in a way too, that was sort of the statement that I was making in, because I've kind of went back and forth. Do I want to go with a publisher? And so for me, I think for these first two projects, that was
Could,
really
could I ask what are the advantages of going with a publisher versus not?
no, I mean, there's obviously tons of benefits to that. You are able to, get access to mainstream media. You have an entire team, right? That's working. You have like a marketing department. So you can sort of just like sit back and just write.
Okay, yeah, and clearly it sounds like some people helped you along the way too, with the cover art and design.
Yeah, I want to shout out. I don't know if they're here, but Lido did the cover, um, and he worked with me on the first book as well. And then I have my very good friend Shannon, who did the art for the book. I don't know if you guys can see this,
Yeah.
um,
Yep. Yep.
but she basically took a photo of me, and then she like drew drew her own art based on the photo. And so I think even that process was very special to just be able to work with all of these different artists and even the folks who helped to like edit the work with me, like Samara and my mentee, I hope she's here, Kylie. And it was just like, it was a group of artists and we just like came together and like birthed this work of art. And I think that was like very special. I
Yeah,
really love that.
that's yeah. So let's talk about one of your top five least favorite terms of all time. The starving artist, the concept of the starving artist. Why do you like that?
I think it's an outdated term,
It's
in
facts.
my opinion, although it's very real because I understand that life very much. But I think just in my spiritual journey and my spiritual walk, I've come to understand that everything is mind, right? Like all is mind. And so obviously the society we live in does not make it easy for artists.
Mhm.
A lot of the belief systems that we hold is not conducive for people to just be free and create. And there's so many like structures in the way, right, to like make us be like, all right, let me just like get a job. But I think that your reality is what you make it. That's just what I believe. And I think that, for example, in the last year and a half, I did not have to work a 9 to 5 job and I've been doing fine, right? Money comes, right? It's kind of adjusting the way that you think about money and in your life and how you can live, and especially now again with this whole idea of creating your own platform, there's tons of ways in which you can still have so much time for your art and still be able to like sustain a living. And so just to be careful with words and what we say, because artists are needed, right? The artists are like the healers of society. The artists are the ones who expand society and expand culture. And so it's really important too that we support artists, that we build a society that's conducive for artists to thrive, right? But also, for us as the artists, we have to understand that we have power within us. It's just finding that power within.
Yeah, yeah. What is the Habesha perspective on artists?
I don't know. There's Habesha folks in here. I mean, y'all can get me on this, but I mean, you're like a derelict if you're. Things are changing. We have the weekend, right? The weekend
That's
is
right.
helping us out a lot. He's Ethiopian. Um, but still, the common career route for an Ethiopian or Eritrean would be you're an engineer or a doctor, and that's sort of like
Scientist,
you've done
scientist.
well. Parents are
That's
proud.
right.
So, but I think that again, that's changing. Like that's changing with every generation. I think for my generation, it was definitely the hardest, especially being the children of immigrants coming here, not really knowing this environment, not really knowing how to maneuver through things, and a lot of like fear-based mentality of like raising young people in this country who are a lot, and that's all children of immigrants, right? You're in a new country, so
Exactly. Every immigrant community can speak to that same thing. I think it's, you want to get professional, secure positions with money. You know what I mean? I think it comes from a sense of practicality rather than like, I don't like art. You know what I mean? I think it's almost a fear-driven. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it. It's meant out of love, but at the same time, artist got art, right? So how did this pandemic? You had alluded to it before, but how did you do during that? You feel yeah, was it ultimately helpful, let's say, for your art?
yeah. I mean, yeah, this has been a tremendously hard year for a lot of folks, so I'm not also saying these things to sort of like boast, but because I've had, friends who've really, really gone through it, friends who've gotten sick, who have lost jobs. So you can kind of get lost in the madness of it, especially with everything that was happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. Although none of that is new to us, it still was very triggering. Then all types of stuff happened this year, and so um, for me personally, I did go through a period of kind of sort of deep depression and just not really knowing what to do with everything that was being thrown at me. But then I also saw it as an opportunity again for me to really create and to go within, because that's really where I felt the therapy come in. So whenever I'd write, even though the world around me felt chaotic and unstable and you know really not knowing what's happening, at least I can turn to my art, and that could be my constant. And from that, it really anchored me actually. Being able to write Rising during the time of the pandemic was something that grounded me and helped me to maintain my sense of self. So I think that's one of the benefits of art, is that it can do that, is that art is medicinal. It can serve as a tool to really ground us and heal us.
Man,
So that's
yeah, I know I know I had the exact same feelings. When we had to shut down the lab, and now I'm just at home the whole time, and
yeah.
it was indeed a sort of a depression. They kind of just sink into it, and you'd work like 4 hours if you were lucky, and my
Yeah.
brain was just pudding. I would say that my brain was pudding, and actually, what fixed it was writing. So I started to write a big grant, and I ended up getting it, which is great. But I had to just decide to focus in on that. So it was writing that really did it, which actually comes to my this was in the alchemy chapter. Um, when you've been discarded, write. Ridiculed and lied to, write. Betrayed and disparaged, write. Left in the trenches of struggle, write. Writers, write. You just got to do it. Just do it, do it, do it. And actually, that feeling was incredibly helpful for me. Do you feel? Was it the same for you? It's like just had to do it.
Yeah, and it's always, I think my writing has always been that for me, even before the pandemic, even when I was going through really hard breakups and difficult times in spaces that I was in, I could always turn to that and find myself again. And so, really, that's one of the things that I do with young people that I did for the last almost like 10 years is working with young people to create art and using that as a form to like build confidence and collaborate together with one another and um, really discover self.
Yeah.
And it's something that I know works because I've seen it in young people and I've seen it in myself as well.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, absolutely. So I have one more question before we open it up to the audience, which is what's next? Every artist's least favorite question.
What's next? Should I say some people are like, I'm gonna talk about it when I'm working on it. But I'm working on a novel now. I'm nearly done with my first novel. So you all will hear about that soon.
Yep, that's right. That's right. I love it. Okay, so what we're going to do is open it up. I have a couple of questions in the chat already. So Mai wants to know how does your family feel about you using autobiographical stuff?
That's a good question. Um, I will say my family is incredibly gracious because in the first book, in Things Unsaid, like I was going there, right? I was talking about family things they were my experiences, but involved other people, and Habesha culture is very much like we don't talk about those. We don't talk about right. And so I know that for me to do that was a very bold thing to do. And at the time it was for me. And I'm assuming that they're fine with it. What I can say is that our relationship has gotten a lot better. I will say that. And I think that goes along with, being able to be honest and open, and maybe things that we're not able to necessarily say
Yeah,
face to face, right? We can say it through our work, and that can still bring folks together. And I'll say definitely that that's what happened, right?
yeah,
And they've always been supportive. Like at the end of the day, you know, they've always been there. So I'm very actually fortunate because I know other Habesha parents would be like,
that's right.
"What? Get out my house!"
And ET makes a mean buna too, man. Let's go.
It's the best buna
Let's
and
go.
Habasha too.
So, and Gladys wants to know: do you struggle with writer's block? Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I do, but I'll say this though, because I'm actually overcoming that, and I'm starting to believe that writer's block is not a real thing. And I say that because how I believe that the creative process works is that all things come from the subconscious mind. And so really all that writer's block is that you're caught up in your thoughts. You're caught up in your thoughts and you're not able to quiet down the thoughts to get to that point where you're able to tap into that, central point of the mind. And so for me, what I do is I just try to like meditate and just relax my body and understand that it's going to take time to build the momentum to get there. But once you're there and once you find your flow, the trick is to just to stay in that space and not float out of that space, but really just understanding that it's always there. The knowledge, the creativity, everything that you want is always there. It's just a matter of like what works for you to get to that point where you can find your flow.
Got it. So, would anybody like to ask a question? I mean, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. It doesn't have to be a question. I mean, if you could talk about what your favorite poem was, what resonated with you, anything like this. I mean, the floor is open for a discussion.
Rahwa.
Hi, Samara. How are you
How
doing?
Good. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
So, Rahwa, I have a question. What was the trigger point that actually pushed you to channel whatever you were going through to channel it into writing poetry? What was the point? Sometimes like you wanted to do it, it's just in the head, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do it, but you don't do it.
Mhm.
So, what was the point that pushed it to the edge? You know what? Let me channel this. Let me overcome it. So, what was the point for you?
You mean like writing poetry in general or writing a specific book?
No, specifically writing that specific books?
Book. Yeah. Um. Okay, I'll give you.
Does it make sense, my question, or no?
It
Sorry.
does. I'll give you an honest response to it. At the time, I really felt like although I loved what I was doing, I knew that I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live, right? And um, and the only thing that after a while, because life got so crazy, a lot was happening, a lot of different things where I was in a very, very like low vibrating state, like going through a lot of depression, anxiety, paranoia. The only thing that felt clear for me and that made sense was to write. So, in a way, to answer that question, it literally saved me. It was my refuge, like to be able to go to my work and know that this is something that's mine, that I belong to, that's coming from a higher place, is was literally like my window of like hope, right? And I think that making the choice, however, to not sink into the depression and making the choice to go and to create and to show up for what I knew was calling me. I think doing that over and over some time finally developed into somehow into a book. And that's how it worked too for the first one as well.
Okay. Okay, it makes sense. That's what I wanted to hear.
I'm gonna switch to Professor Cross.
Hi, how you
Hi,
doing?
Brian. How are you?
Hey,
Good to see you.
likewise. I have a question. I always had a question about artists and writers in general. Um, when you set a time during the day when you write, or like do writers like write from 9 to 5? They're sitting there writing, or as soon as a thought comes to your head, you just write that down and put it to the side. I want to know what the process is. How you do it?
Yeah. That's a great question. Well, so I'm a mom, so that's a huge part of my life. And so, during the day, I'm very much dedicated to what I need to do for my son. Also, again, back to the subconscious mind, it's most open earliest in the morning. So for me, I wake up at 5 a.m. And you'll see other artists who are maybe musicians. They usually work at like their peak time of creativity is like 2 a.m. or something like that. But for me, I have to structure it, and I have to same way you would get up and like go to work at 5:30 a.m. the latest. I'm up and I'm writing, and I'm committing every day to a minimum of 3 hours, because when you're writing, it requires a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And so it's hard to do that as the sun comes up, as the emails come in, as all the need, whatever our daily responsibilities are. You're pulled in so many different directions. That's why you see like these like you hear these artists that just like go and like retreat into some random hole somewhere, or they're like when they're creating they don't talk to anyone, and they're in their own zone. It is because to tap into that space, you have to be very focused and concentrated. So for us who have like kids and jobs, like I think it's really crucial to carve out an amount of time during the day when people are sleeping. Like that's what works for me. Yeah.
Great. Debbie Alamro has a question.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Debbie. How
Hi.
are you?
Good.
Fellow
Thank you.
poet.
Yes. Congratulations on your second book.
Thank you.
So actually, my question is, having written your first book and seeing like such great reception to it, seeing people like quote your poems, just seeing how well it does, what was the pressure that you had in writing the second book, and what advice would you have for someone who's like starting to write their second book?
Oh my God, that's such a good question, because you know what I said to myself? I was like, all right, I wrote that one book. I don't know if I can ever write another book again. Those thoughts actually went into my head where I was like, there's no possible way that I could actually write a whole other book again. Like all the energy and time, and it was just a miracle, or I just got lucky, or just all these crazy just false things that you sort of feed into. And I think that that's normal for a lot of artists, especially like especially you hear about these artists that have these big hits and they're like, oh, you're never going to get another big hit again, but then again, it's like it's all in your mind, right? And if you created a book, which you have, you've already created an amazing book, you can create another one. And I think it's showing up, telling yourself that, and you know just like trusting and like believing in yourself as an artist. Like that's such a cool, awesome thing to be able to channel and produce work and put it out into the world. It's a gift that you've been given. Like that's something that can't be explained. I don't know of any gift that's not given from a place of love, and love would never just like bounce on you. So it's, again, it's there. You just have to believe that it's there, and like be thankful that you've been blessed with that gift.
I think that's right. So there's one question in the chat, which is Asifash Makonnen wants to know, basically going off the process question, can you talk about your relationship to reading your work out loud and doing spoken word? Right? Is there work that you write but you wouldn't want to read it out loud? Yeah, it's a good question.
Is there work that I would want to write but not read out loud?
Yeah, exactly. What's
Yeah.
the relationship between them? And then
So,
we'll come to Ayodeji.
yeah, thank you for that question. For poetry, like I started writing poetry when I was 10, and then when I was in high school, um I was like really into the spoken word scene in New York, and in college I'd always so that was sort of my relationship with poetry, in that I was a spoken word artist. I never sort of conceived of myself of coming out with a book, and I and with and and you're right, like there are certain pieces that you get into a certain mode when you're writing a spoken word piece as opposed to when you're writing a book, because with book it's a lot about formatting, it's about storytelling, it's about the rhythm of when someone is turning the page and reading the words, right? A lot of the poems are prose, so how are you able to, in like a sentence or two, get the same energy and feeling that you would from a huge spoken word piece? Like that in and of itself is like an art form, to know how to do that. And that actually took me a lot of time, a lot of practicing, a lot of studying other people's work as well. And so there definitely is a difference. Yeah. I don't know if I answered that question.
Yep. We have a question from Ayodeji.
Oh, hey.
Hi, Amaya. How are you doing?
Oh,
Congrats,
I'm brother.
congrats on your new book. I'm a big fan. My question is, before you write your book, do you know like what you're writing about? Like, okay, I'm writing about X, Y, and Z, and then you just dive into the whole topic, or you just write everything, then you realize that, oh, okay, the bits and pieces come together to be something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first book, I
I
didn't
didn't
know
know
what I
what
was
I was
reading.
reading.
I
Oh,
I
just
just
read. And
and
then,
then
oh, there's a,
there's a
do you mind muting your,
your
okay, thank you. So there
so
was
there
a,
was a
oh,
Where's the
reverb. There's like a reverb
Let's
on
try
there.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So for the first book, I just basically was writing poems, and the next thing I knew, I had a book. And then what I did was I started to say, look at the different pieces and say, oh wow, I'm talking about falling in love and heartbreak, right? In these poems, and in this poem I'm talking about spirituality and my ascension process. In this book I'm talking about my identity. In these group of poems I'm talking about my identity and upbringing. And so I sort of from there devised these 5 chapters for the first book. And so for this book, Rising, it was a lot easier to structure it because my concept for Rising was that it was going to be a continuation of Things Unsaid. So I basically was just continuing on with the themes that I had started from the first work. And so I would structure the all the poems around those same sort of themes. But initially it was just like random poems, and I just like was trying to decipher and decode what my spirit was, saying, or what the work was saying to me, and then I put it in book form.
So there's one question in the chat Yeah, this is from Samson Styles. He wants to know what are the challenges to self-publish, and what
Mm,
advice would you give to successfully publish and monetize?
yeah. So can you read the first part of that
Yeah,
question again?
what are the challenges to self-publish?
Okay. The challenges to self-publish is that you're doing everything on your own. So you have to have the energy and the will to want to do that. And there has to be like, at least for me, there has to be like a purpose, right? Because it's definitely not easy. But obviously when you're going through the process, you fall in love and it's really amazing. I think for me, the challenges, I think for me, challenges were not so much in creating the work and bringing people together, but I would say marketing for me because I'm like not necessarily like a business. I'm not, marketing is not my expertise, right? This is why you have huge publishing companies because they have entire departments and entire teams dedicated to do that. So I think for me, what was most challenging was that I don't have like a huge team, you know, of people that I can kind of like throw the extra work that I don't want to do to. But at the same time, I think what I've done really well is I've utilized social media and from that I've slowly built like a core following and I think that's really special. And I I I think anything is possible, really it's whatever you imagine for yourself. And so yeah.
Yeah, good. So Mark Nevers had a question.
Hey Mark.
Mark, are you there?
All right,
Yeah.
no comments.
No problem. So how about El Haj? You want to go? El Haj, are you there?
Yeah. Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Hello.
Good, good.
Okay. Uh, let me put the video. All right, it's not coming up. Rahawa, I know you since you were little.
You do?
Um,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I don't. I wanted to show my face, but the video was not coming up. Anyways, I am Yabios and Ethiopia's friend. My name
Oh,
is Elias,
oh yes.
and
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, I know you since you were little. And to grow up so fast and to be able to write two beautiful books. I have the first one, and certainly I'll be getting the second one. And in short notice, I was able to invite six members of my family. They
Oh,
are on this audience. But unfortunately, my daughter and my niece are at class right now.
it's okay.
So my question is, would you be able to put it somewhere? I put it on chat. Would you be able to put it on YouTube or somewhere else so that we can share with so many people? Because this presentation has to be viewed by all, Ethiopians and Eritreans, particularly the generation like you and my niece and my nephew. On this presentation, I have my niece, nephew, my brother is here, my sister is here, but I want my daughter and the other niece also to be able to see this presentation. So do you think you'll be able to post it somewhere? That's my first. And secondly, I also want to say thank you to the moderator. He's very, very good. I
Thanks.
appreciate that. And to see Rahawa so presenting this in a very eloquent, poetic, very philosophical. I have learned you were born just yesterday, and you were be able to teach us so much in such a very short period of time. So I really want to congratulate you and
Hi.
thank you for that.
Yeah, and LA. Thank you
Thank you. Thank you.
so
So,
much.
so Mark, what Mark wanted to ask is, in what things do you find inspiration?
Mm. Other artists inspire me. My culture inspires me. Um, my home, New York, just growing up in New York is inspires me. My son inspires me. I love museums. I love I love going to galleries and museums and viewing other art. Like visual art is, that's how me and Mark connected. Like that's always been my thing. Like I think visual artists are like the most amazing people. Like it just something about being able to just see an image and then have it hit you in your soul. It's always been a something that I've used to help with my writing.
Yeah, that's great. So Maya had a question. That's a great one. What was your initial reaction the first time someone you didn't know purchased or read your book?
Um, I was like, cool. I was like,
Really? I would have been like, what?
someone I didn't know, like someone I
Yeah,
have to think back to that time. What was the um I guess I was like, really? Yeah, because the first book, I was just like, I don't know if I'm really a real author, right? You don't really like,
yeah.
about that seriously. Then you hear feedback and you see people purchasing it. So at first I was just like, are you sure? Really? And then the more people, I was like, okay, so I think I could actually do this thing. Like this is, you know, so yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool feeling. What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Hmm, that's such a great question. I used to love, like, I was one of those kids in high school that just like loved reading. And I think the one book that really like stuck with me was The Alchemist.
Hmm.
Oh,
And it just changed the trajectory of my life. I don't know if you guys have heard the book by Paulo Coelho,
Yeah.
um, Octavia Butler,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, Sonia Sanchez. Like these are all people who, and I would say even like characters who stay with you and who almost become like mentors to you. And so I think reading work made me see the power of the spoken word, but also when I would, be in high school and just go to these open mics and showcases and stuff like that, and just hear the response from people when I stood up and performed. And I was like, oh wow, like words have power, this is really like a really cool tool that we have.
I think that's right. Yeah. Well, I hate to call it, but we might have to go. That's all right. I want to put two links in the chat. One is an Amazon link, and for my non-Amazon people, there's a non-Amazon link where you can click to on Amaya Sunn's website. And Rahwa, this was really great. I love it.
And one thing I want to
Oh, yep.
say real quick, I just have a list of thank yous. But before I go through my list of thank yous, I just wanted to thank you all first for just being able to come here and like share your time, your energy, like your questions, your space. And I really, really do appreciate that. And one last thing for any folks who have purchased my book on Amazon or will be purchasing your book on Amazon, if you could please write reviews. That would definitely help as an independent artist, right? So people who may not necessarily know of me or know of my work can like see what the experience was for you as the reader and invest in the art. So I'd really love and appreciate if you all can go back and write reviews. I have a few people to thank. I wanted to first thank the Women's Writing Circle. I run a poetry or just a creative writing group every month with three amazing young women who actually mentored as teenagers, and now they're like grown women, and they have definitely been a part of inspiring me to continue to write. So thank you for Doss, Khadija, and Kylie. I want to thank Lido for doing the cover art for both of my books. His company's name is Otel Cryptic Media. Shannon Mims, who's like a childhood friend, an amazing woman who did my art, and the visual art for the book. I also want to thank my dad because the story about our grandmother, he basically sat with me for hours, just telling me family stories and orating all this history, and I was able to document so much, and that story wouldn't have been able to be what it was if he, didn't give me that time and that space. So I appreciate that so much. Khadijah, my mentor, who has always encouraged me to write and put out work. She's a phenomenal woman who's worked with so many different writers, and she's definitely been someone who's been an inspiration for me. My editor, Christine Fenner, Kylie, who's also an amazing writer, helped me to birth this book. My I'd like to also thank Samara as well, who also helped with birthing the book. Um, yeah, my beautiful circle of friends who've always been there for me, been my cheerleaders in my darkest moments. I love y'all. You know who you are. My parents, my son, my sister, and my amazing brother who moderated
Hey.
this amazing.
My pleasure. I appreciate that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really do. Okay. Well, with that, we'll close it out. And thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much.